I want to now move on to our next speaker, who is Lejeune Montgomery Tabron. And she is the CEO of an amazing organization called the Kellogg Foundation, WKKF. And she's going to share some of the work that she's doing in thinking through and applying geographic thinking and ultimately GIS to the issues of racial equity in the communities that we are all living in here in the US, but also around the world. So welcome, Lejeune. I appreciate this opportunity to be with you. And as you know, maybe firsthand, I have a real connection with the organization that you run, the Kellogg Foundation. And Mr. Kellogg, well, most people have had a relationship with Mr. Kellogg because they eat Kellogg cornflakes or Rice Krispies or these sort of things. But for me, I got acquainted with them because I went to a school, Cal Poly in Pomona, which was founded by Mr. Kellogg with a certain focus on community and looking at people that would not have gotten into normal universities. That was me. And it was sympathetic, and they brought me in and they nurtured me and taught me education in a different way. He used to call it learn by doing. And so it's ingrained in my soul, this idea of learn by doing. But so we became acquainted recently through an amazing coincidence. But I'm doing all the talking here. Lejeune, why don't you introduce yourself and let's get started.
Well, thank you, Jack. And it is a pleasure to be with you again. And as you mentioned, when we spoke originally and learned that the impact of Mr. Kellogg is very much a part of your journey as well as it is mine, it gave me goosebumps at the time because, you know, we do this work every day and we meet so many people. But when you hear the stories of his impact and the fact that we're all on a journey to make the world a better place is just something that connects us so intimately. And it's just been a pleasure partnering with you and the work that we are going to continue to do together.
You know, we have lots of shared belief, and I guess we're talking here to all of our colleagues around the world who are GIS people. The foundation that you run, why don't you share some of the things that really are the core things that Mr. Kellogg set up that, for me, just inspire me every time I hear them.
At the beginning, Mr. Kellogg made a statement and he said, I'll invest my money in people. And what we'll find is that he understood that people create the conditions. And he gave us as a North Star to create a place where all children can thrive. And we know that that happens when people create the conditions for children to thrive. And our work has been all about looking at how children and then their parents and then communities are places of equal opportunity so that all children through their families and their ability to provide for themselves is nourished and grown in every community around the world. And that's really our work. What we've learned over 90 years of doing this work is that in order to make sure that all children thrive, you must look at issues of racial equity, community engagement, and leadership. We call those three elements our DNA. And we know that these are at the root of creating thriving communities where all children can have opportunities. And that has been our work. And this partnership allows us to continue our efforts in this journey, looking at, through the lens of the SDGs, how we can make sure that every community all over the nation and the world creates those opportunities for children to thrive.
I happen to know personally that a lot of your priority has been, especially in recent years, on dealing with racial equity. And I'd really like you, for everybody listening, to define exactly the idea and the theory that you are creating that supports that.
We believe that racial equity is about two things. One is about beliefs. And what we want people to believe is that everyone has an opportunity to thrive regardless of their physical color or characteristics. So racial equity is about believing that we are all human beings, we all have value, and we all deserve opportunities to thrive. The second part of our racial equity work is looking at the systems and structures that create racial inequity and changing those systems so that they produce equitable outcomes. And you do have to admit that the systems have been created by people and that those systems could, maybe intentionally or unintentionally, have a bias that affords some opportunities and not others. And in our racial equity journey, we just want to look at both the beliefs and the systems and ask the same people that work in these systems to pause and think about whether it's something that they can do to change the system so that they're more equitable.
Yeah, I
and
like
that's the journey.
That's the journey. Being able to characterize racial equity as an outcome of systems that may build in biases or may build in different kinds of issues is really a wonderful way to see it. So in some ways, geography enables the idea of seeing systems and then being able to overlay these systems and see some of the interrelationships. What was the result of redlining and how that affected this or that? These sort of things are some of the issues that our users are playing with, but I really enjoy and appreciate your perspective on this.
What I would say is the tools that you provide us through the GIS applications actually allow us to illuminate the current impact of the system and to determine what path forward might change the outcome. So for example, during COVID, right, we have seen the maps that show here is where COVID exists. And you can see patterns forming of where the surges were. But we can also use your data and the tools to disaggregate even further into understanding the patterns that are forming in those systems as they exist today. So when you disaggregate the data and you start to see, as we did, that people of color we're getting more we're having more complications as it related to COVID. We're even maybe dying more than others. That allowed us to understand what are the systems that are producing these outcomes. And we learned more people of color were more of the essential workers who could not stay inside of their home and quarantine. They had to continue to work, and therefore they were exposed by greater measures and impacted more greatly. We needed more information and to understand those systems more fully, to understand how to help keep them safe. And that's work that is happening. And I think that's a perfect example of what our alliance is going to provide for these countries so that they can take better measures to improve the outcomes.
Last year, Stefan Swinefest actually shared with us the work that he's doing at the UN and how we are supporting him in building a kind of SDG framework for being able to monitor and hopefully manage the world to a better place. One of those particular issues, one of the particular SDGs that he has organized, which is SDG 10, which is all about racial equity and equity in general around the world, which is the topic of this particular effort that we're doing with Kellogg Foundation.
Thank you. And yes, I agree. This will be amazing. And the work will be work that will take us forward in many significant ways. But this partnership between the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, our grantee, the Public Foundation, Esri, and the United Nations, a very formidable partnership, and we're calling it the SDG Data Alliance. This alliance will enable 20 countries in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, we know everyone is working on the goals, but many countries face very practical and technological barriers, and it prevents them from their full participation in working toward the goals. So the grant will build the information technology capacity and infrastructure to allow these countries to monitor and report their efforts towards achieving the goals. And they're going to do this through what we are calling the grant and using our DNA lens to do this work.
It's like you were saying, I mean, Esri has great technology, and we can provide technology grants to the different countries, and we've been doing that in test cases around the world. But I like your phrase of DNA. You're providing the DNA, the actual substance of what will make these systems come alive, because it's not just technology. It's actually got to be the people, the investments in people. And particularly, I like your philosophy. I mean, why I was so attracted in the first place is your philosophy of building communities. Can you maybe talk about your sense of communities and how they, and of course, Mr. Kellogg's vision initially?
It was his vision. He created the entire foundation. And again, as I mentioned, he knew that people had the inherent capacity to improve their own lives. And so he wanted people to work on creating these conditions for children. And so what we have been doing at the Kellogg Foundation is lifting up people through Mr. Kellogg's theory of change. We call it his theory of change. He said that if you bring people together and promote cooperative planning and infuse that planning with intelligent study and support their group action, sustainable change will occur. We call it the formula: cooperative planning, intelligent study, and group action. This partnership is about the intelligent study. Of course, people have data, but we need the right data. We need data that's been informed by people in the community that actually experience the disparity or the issues that we're working on. We need to bring them to the table, and we need to have data that's been informed by everyone at the table. And what we know, we've seen the evidence that when people create the solutions, they sustain the solutions.
Yes.
When it's a bottom-up approach, you're more likely to have sustainable change over time. What doesn't work is when change is forced or mandated from up above. And what you find is the community is not invested in that solution, and it goes away very quickly.
Yes.
So if you really want sustainable change, it's the process of engagement that leads to that, bringing people into the conversation who are impacted, who will give you a perspective that those who are not impacted will never know.
Lejeune, what are you doing for local communities here in the US and also around the world?
Yes, Jack, we envision a space where we can inspire and activate change makers around solutions in many communities throughout the nation and the world. And the way we see that happening is through what we call a community action hub. And we see these community action hubs bringing community together and fostering collective understanding. They will visualize their data on maps of how the solutions for the issues that they're working on. And then we will equip the community with all these available tools to solve these problems. And what we believe is it will lead to action, and communities will collectively drive agendas that will change the outcomes for people in their community. And we've actually been working on a demonstration of this. And we are working in a partnership with the Southern Communities Initiative. The Southern Communities Initiative is a coalition of corporate funders and foundations working to strengthen racial equity across the South. And they're doing this by pooling funds and developing a long-term plan of action. And they're going to focus on Atlanta, Birmingham, Memphis, Houston, New Orleans, and Charlotte. These are all communities with very stark racial disparities. And we'd like to show you a demonstration of how these tools can align their work and bring about racial equity in these Southern communities.
A community action hub is more than a website. It's a place where ideas can change minds and activate individuals to develop solutions. We use the geography of New Orleans to show this idea, since both the city and the region are part of the Southern Communities Initiative. We also know that many community-based organizations are actively working together for an equitable New Orleans. The people in these communities are change makers. They're connecting businesses to capital. They're creating jobs. They're growing food. They're mentoring youth. And you're doing all this with GIS. When you launch a community action hub, you can invite the change makers to lead the conversation. They're already doing great work. Bring them in for a greater collective impact. These 4 pillars represent initiatives a city may want to address. Let's look at wealth creation. Data in the form of maps helps us foster collective understanding for better and more equitable communities. An initiative within a hub brings those maps together. A simple population map like this allows us to visualize the people of color by census tract. We can further our understanding around indicators like income by race. We might also use the data to understand the kinds of resources available or not available to communities, like access to vehicles. This information is important to understand how far community members need to travel to access healthy food or jobs. And ultimately, the data might present opportunities to take action. This map reflects the Job Proximity Index, where jobs are accessible to the surrounding community. These data points can indicate where there is room for investing in education, business, and job creation. An initiative can equip the community with solutions to create action. These solutions can take the form of apps that help the community find, support, and contract with local businesses owned by people of color, or in surveys that can connect businesses with potential job applicants. Dashboards can be used to track the economic status and advancement toward racial equity. They can guide leaders, banks, and community development financial institutions to opportunities for local investment. This is just an example for what a community action hub could be. But imagine the potential of bringing multiple communities in a region together, linked as change makers. This particular hub of hubs represents the work of the Kellogg Foundation's partner, the Southern Communities Initiative. It is a place to share best practices, pull together data, and connect across communities, leading to widespread impact. The Southern Community Initiative identified 4 racial equity pillars enabled by digital access and physical infrastructure. Community action hubs can show how we can map opportunities for progress. Now, many of you have gone from open data to hub for citizen engagement. We believe that this model can expand racial equity for greater action in your community.
That was just an amazing demonstration. And as I understand it, you're working on making this into a template so that our users who are working with hubs in their respective countries and cities can actually apply that template again and again to really bring this to scale, transform communities around the world into this idea of engaging individuals and around issues that they themselves really care about.
What we hope to have happen from this demonstration is that the GIS community will help us to realize this vision. We have the tools. The tools are available. We want the GIS community to stand up these community action hubs all over the nation. We want them to help us join change makers together and lead in this conversation. and understand that this is a moment where we can take the best GIS tools and infuse it with a racial equity lens that will make significant progress toward achieving the kind of equality that we envision for the nation and the world.
Look, ladies and gentlemen, this is serious business. These footprints that the Kellogg Foundation is putting down, working with their different collaborators, are going to show the way for us to create a better world. And LeJeune, let me again say thank you so much, not only for this partnership, but also for the sharing that you've done about your vision and how you really see making the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a partnership that we will nurture into the future, and definitely around the aligned purpose of building a better world for tomorrow.